We are all here for one reason, and that's to take a look at some executive dashboards and maybe learn a little bit of how you could build out what may be considered an executive dashboard. So let me start off by talking about some of the differences here. And when I refer to an executive dashboard, most of the time when we're working with execs, they're less concerned about things that a manager may be concerned about. So, for example, as a manager, I may be concerned about, what my call volume and a volume coming into my my department, or my call queues, or my hunt groups, but also what my employees are doing. How many calls are people taking? Do I have one employee that's maybe outshining other employees? Or do I have somebody that maybe needs a little bit of training? So those are more managerial type dashboards and widgets that we see people looking for. Today, we're going to focus a little bit less on the employees and more look at our company as a whole. So when we start to talk about executives, we look at things from a much higher level, or a hierarchy level. So less about the individual employees and maybe more about how my departments are comparing amongst each other, or how my queues are comparing amongst each other. And that's what we're going to really focus in on today. So the dashboard that I'm showing you right here is what I would consider an executive type dashboard. It's really monitoring my departments, different teams, different call queues. There's a little bit of sales information or a little bit of user information, but we try not to overload these types of dashboards with general user information, because at 9 times out of 10, that's not necessarily what execs want. They want to know how the company is performing, how the different departments or hierarchy levels are performing, and that's really what we're going to focus in on today. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to first start off by creating a new dashboard right here, and we're going to start from scratch. We're going to take what I've shown you, and we're going to show you how to easily build that out in Verify. So I'm going to just create a MS Teams executive. We'll create executive dashboard here. All right. And the other thing I'm going to turn on is this public access and this permalinking. I do recommend everybody do this. This is a great way to be able to share out these dashboards with other folks, other executives. It doesn't require them to log in. A lot of times when we work with executives or higher level, they're not necessarily interested in creating their own dashboards or building out their own reports. They want to be able to just kind of pop in and see things. And that's exactly where this permalink is going to come from. So I do recommend, when you are building one of these dashboards, toggle this guy on, and I'm going to show you how to use it in a second. All right. So what we're going to start off with here is a blank slate, and we're going to walk through building out the different types of widgets. If you are interested in what the various widgets are, or the different styles of widgets, we do have a webinar out there that does cover what each particular widget looks like and what it does and what it performs. So I do urge you guys to go ahead and take a look at that. That's a great one. It's been out there for quite some time. We've got a lot of people looking at that guy just to get an understanding of what they're building. So let's go ahead and start. When we first saw my dashboard, you saw a bunch of the color ones, the pie chart. So we're going to start with that. So I'm going to click a new widget here, and we're going to select our call analytics. Then what we're going to do is we're going to navigate down to our MS Teams organization here, and we're going to select the widget type. Now, that first widget that we were showing you, kind of the colorful pie chart, is a call distribution widget. So I'm going to start with that guy there, and we're going to build one of these guys out we're going to take a look at departments first. So I'm going to call this top 5 departments by volume. All right, we're going to give this guy a simple name. We're going to keep that. I'm going to keep my refresh interval to 15 minutes, although these can go up higher. These aren't dashboards that people are looking at like, hey, I need to know what's going on right now. So you can adjust the refresh interval on these and usually take them down a little bit because, again, these aren't things where I'm looking at the current day to see what my employees and how my queue looks. I'm looking at these to understand how my organization is performing. So the next thing in this particular widget is grouping. So for grouping, this is kind of the key. We need to decide what do we want to show in this widget. I always refer to grouping kind of like pivot tables in Excel. Is I'm taking a data set, and then I'm going to go ahead and summarize that data set off of different things. Now, because I'm building one off of my departments, and departments is an MS Teams feature in the users, so I'm going to go ahead and I want to see all incoming and outgoing calls to my departments. And in this case, I'm going to choose, just again, I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to keep it to the top 5 departments. Now, pretty much all we have to do right here. So the next thing I'm going to do is adjust my search. Now, your search can go any number of ways. Everybody's familiar with Microsoft, and there's 10 different ways to do the same thing. Verify has the same set of criteria. I could search for individual departments. I could search for a couple departments. I could search for users that go into a department. But we also like to try to keep things simple, and that's what we're going to do in this widget. I'm going to create a search that is all calls. In other words, I'm going to search for all information. However, what I want is my search criteria is going to be this guy right here, call scenario types. All right. Now, searching for all calls, like I said, can be done any number of ways. I can search for just wildcards and phone numbers. I could search for individual departments if I wanted to. So I can come in here and say, you know what, I want to add all my departments manually. Absolutely could do that, but if you've got 100 departments in your large organization, obviously you don't necessarily need to do that. That's a bit cumbersome. However, maybe if you're managing or you want this dashboard to just be for certain 5 or 10 or 15 departments, you can go ahead and select those. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to try to keep things simple, and we're going to go ahead and use our call scenario types. Call scenario types identify all the different scenarios a call can fit into within Verify and MS Teams. You could search for group calls, video calls. I only want to see calls with people that shared their screens or answered calls. But in this case, what we're doing is we're going to keep things simple. We're just going to bring back the total calls. What this does is it basically brings back every call for that I've had in my organization. It's a quick down dirty filter. It's an efficient filter to be able to bring all that information back and let our grouping do what it does, and that is group those on the departments that the calls are coming in or out of. Right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our time period here. This is our demo lab environment. So I always go ahead and just do something like the current and previous month because we don't have a ton of data going through our demo environment. We can, of course, set times of days and certain days of the week. However, this is not a dashboard where we're saying, hey, I want to see per hour a day or per day of the week. So for me, simplicity is the key here. We're just going to show everything, bring us the whole kitchen sink, and save that, and we're done. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and look through all of the calls, and it's going to identify all of the departments and calls that aren't in any department. You're going to notice that we have this no associated calls in departments. That's totally okay. That's going to be normal. Not every single user in your MS Teams organization probably has a department. So if I don't want to see those, I can go ahead and go like that. And now I've got a nice clean dashboard that is identifying the top 5 departments in my organization and showing me the volume of calls coming into that organization. Super easy, super simple, and great information from an executive view to be able to just say, hey, you know what? Okay, we could clearly see who's getting the most calls in our organization. Right now, in that dashboard I showed you, you noticed I had several of these. I was looking at departments, I was looking at teams. I think maybe one of them might have been call queues. I don't remember. But what we don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. In other words, I don't want to have to come in here and select all that information over again. Great thing about Verify is simplicity. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to go ahead and build out some of those dashboards that we were just looking at. So instead of reinventing the wheel here, I'm going to simply copy this widget we've got right here, and I'm just going to change it. So this one's looking at departments. Microsoft Teams is big on Teams. Go figure. It's got the name in the name. So rather than going ahead and recreating this whole thing, I am simply going to edit the widget that I copied, change the name of it, and then change what I'm grouping on. And that's it. So the search set by design is going to look at all the calls. So we don't need to change anything here. The only thing I need to change is to make sure that everybody knows that this is Teams and that we are now summarizing on the teams. And I'm going to go ahead and save that widget. And now I'm going to show the top 5 teams in my organization that are receiving calls. And again, we've got our Verify team, our Master Chiefs team, and several other test teams. Also that no associated, because much like I said with departments, not every single user is going to be part of a team, and that's totally okay. If I don't want to see those, I can go ahead and just check those guys off, and there we go. Now we've got a great one for looking at teams. Right? You can see this does make it easy to be able to just easily use these guys and flip them across and keep going and adding different widgets based on hierarchy levels within your organization. Again, I'm not focusing in on the users. I'm strictly focusing in on what an executive might want to see, and that's going to be the performance and the ones that are the getting the most calls. I'm going to go ahead and add another one of these guys just because we're on a roll here. And I'm going to edit this guy down. I did mention queues earlier, so we're going to go ahead and create a queue one here. So let's do that. I'm just going to, again, change my name. And I'm going to change, instead of my primary grouping now looking at my teams, I'm going to change this to look at my called queues. And you know what? I can change this to look at the top 10, although we only have a couple call queues. So I'm just going to keep this guy at 5, give it a save. And now we've got another widget here that is looking at my top 5 call queues. And we can see we have a lot of unassociated calls. Now, that is intentional because my call queues handle a small majority of my calls. But if you remember, our search is looking at every single call in the organization. So we can do a couple different things. One, I can just say, you know what, I don't want to see those. I just want to see my call queues. Or two, I can easily just come into this widget if I don't have a ton of queues. And instead of looking at call scenarios here, I can just look at my called queues and say, you know what, I really only need to see this queue. And we've got some historic ones in our system here and these 3 queues there. And that's going to go ahead and then start looking at the call queues. Again, I've got it unassociated. That's okay because I've got some users that go to some call queues that don't exist anymore. And I can check that off. And there we go. Now we're looking at just our queues. So a couple different ways to do the same thing. But the idea here is keeping things simple and keeping things uniform. So you can just copy these particular widgets and use them throughout the life of your product. Now, the copy functionality is not only simply limited to just the looking at the pie charts. I can also copy these and look at these from like a grouping perspective. We're going to show that in 1 second. One more that I do like to create here, and this one focuses on sales. But we see a lot of people in financial institutions when this focuses on branches, and that's kind of looking at the top 5 or 10 individuals answering calls. Not looking at all individuals, that gets overwhelming for an executive because let's face it, they don't know who a lot of the agents are and the different people of the teams. If you've got 5,000 people in your organization, they're not going to be able to look or want to see all those names, but they're going to want to kind of see the top people looking at information or the top people taking calls or receiving calls. So one more we're going to go ahead and build out here, and we could pick any one of these guys here. I'm going to pick on this one right here, and we're going to copy this guy here. And there he is. And we're going to change this up. So I'm going to look at our sales department here. Top 5 sales reps by volume. And we're going to create this guy here. Now, these were all built around that hierarchy level, looking at queues, looking at teams, looking at departments. But for this one, we're going to go ahead and focus more on the users than the departments. So instead of looking at the hierarchy levels, let me see if I can do that, get around that guy. I got a little mystery box down here at the bottom of my screen that's blocking stuff. We're going to go ahead and look at the calling or called party users. So you know what? In this case, we're going to show the top 10. So as an executive, I may want to see my top 10 sales reps, or I may want to see my top 10 technical representatives. So all we're going to do is change this guy to the calling or called party name, but we are going to adjust our search sets. Now, if I was looking at the top 5 people or top 10 people looking at queues, I'd be done. I could leave this here, and it's going to show me the top 5 people answering calls out of my queues. But in this case, I want to look at the sales folks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to filter this down to the departments. And I'm going to pick my sales department. All right. So instead of looking at all calls, I'm just going to look at my sales calls. So now I'm isolating all my calls down to just my sales department, and I'm going to go ahead and identify the top 10 users taking calls from my sales department, and there we go. Now I can see the top 10 sales reps that are handling calls in my organization very quickly, very easily. And like I said, if sales isn't for you, you guys are not an inbound or outbound sales organization or don't have part of a sales organization, that's totally okay. This could be done for your queues. This could be done for your teams. This could be done for your departments or any other number of hierarchy levels. That's just a matter of adjusting the search to identify the hierarchy level you want to bring back, and then adjusting the grouping to also identify the users that are in that particular part of the organization. All right. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create one that's based on volume. Volume is always an important one. Sometimes it's all calls, sometimes it's just outbound calls. But for this one, we're going to focus in on a different widget type. So I'm going to go ahead and create, again, new widget, and I'm going to select my call analytics. I'm going to go down to my Microsoft Teams organization. And for this one, I'm going to choose a call volume by time period widget. This is a little bit different than what we've been looking at. It's not our pie chart. This is more of a grid or a graph that's going to represent each hour of the day. And I'm going to look at my inbound calls. All right, and we're going to go ahead and just keep that. We're just giving this guy a name. We don't really need to change anything over here other than what time period we want this widget to appear by. So for me, I want to identify the busiest time of the day for inbound calls, and that's what we're going to build out here. So rather than looking at the time period of day of week, I'm going to go ahead and look at this per hour a day. And you saw you can go down to quarter hour of a day, half hour a day, date, month. But for this particular scenario, we're just going to look at per hour of day. We want to see our inbound calls. So a couple different ways we can do this. The first thing we're going to do is we want to identify our inbound calls. We're going to give our search a name here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on the direction field. All right. Direction field is derived from MS Teams. And we're simply going to say, I want to see the inbound calls. Then we select the time period that we want our widget to be for. And in this case, we're going to do the same thing. We'll just kind of pick on the current and previous couple months. And for this one, I also like to add my business hours. The reason being is I don't need a whole bunch of blank graphs. If I open up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I don't need to see midnight to 6 a.m. But maybe you do, so you can leave this at all day, or you can set your time zones here. And I'm just going to set from 9 a.m. and we'll go to about 5 p.m. here for 6. All right, that's it. So now I've got a time-based graph, and I'm going to expand this guy. That is showing me the volume of inbound calls, and we can see that we're not very busy during the 1 and 2 o'clock hour. But for the current and previous 2 months, that I could see that 5 p.m. hour is by far our busiest. Now, this is our lab, so gives us an opportunity to make a lot of test calls at that hour, so that's probably why. But this is a great way to be able to adjust staffing, but also from a perspective, be able to just identify when we have that most inbound traffic coming in. And this one is wide open because, again, keep in mind what I'm searching on. I'm just searching on inbound. I can combine this. If I wanted to say, hey, you know what, for my sales department, I want to know when my most inbound calls take place. Well, then I could just add a filter in here for my called department, which is sales, and this is going to show me the most inbound calls coming to my sales department. If I wanted to add 2 different departments, I could go ahead and do that as well. So if you wanted to identify this just for a particular department, all you have to do is add that department filter in there and you're done. Right. Now that we have this great one, again, we do love simplicity over here at Verify, so let's not reinvent the wheel. I also want to see when that outbound traffic has taken place. So let's copy this widget and simply change a few fields and look at our outbound traffic. We're going to change the title so nobody's confused. And we're simply going to change from inbound to outbound. And there we go. So now we're looking at our outbound traffic. Again, all pertinent and valuable information from an executive perspective. We are seeing our top hierarchy levels. We're seeing our top representatives. We're seeing when we have the inbound calls coming in, when our outbound calls going out. And we can filter these down any number of ways to make them more distinct to a hierarchy level or even a series of users. All right. So next thing we're going to do with our remaining time here is we're going to get into what I like to call some grouping widgets. Grouping widgets are great because they give you the ability to go ahead and show different values, but also compare different metrics. Where when we're looking at these, we're predominantly looking at the call volume, but we're not necessarily seeing answer rate or abandonment rates or placed and received rates, things like that. So that's the next thing we're going to go ahead and focus in on. So I'm going to create a new widget here, and I'm going to go up to my call analytics, and I'm going to select my platform. We're going to build MS Teams widgets, of course. And in this case, we're going to go with our grouping statistics widget. Right? This widget may look overwhelming, but it's really not. And I'm going to tell you why, because once you kind of build this out, you're going to look at some of these metrics and be like, they make total sense. Answer count is answer count. Total count is total count. Totally makes sense. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to build a departmental report by volume. And rather than just showing the volume and the total calls, we're going to look at this from an executive perspective where I want to see how many calls are being placed, how many calls are being answered. Are we sharing our screen? Are they video calls? What departments are doing video calls? Things like that. Things that are important to how you run an organization. So we're going to just give this, we'll just say, department report, dashboard. We'll call it a widget. All right, and you can name these guys anything that you want. And for this one, the next thing we're going to do is we want to identify, again, same way we did in our pie widgets up here, we want to identify how we're grouping this. Now, again, I call this a department widget, so we're building a department widget. So we're going to go ahead and build a calling or called party department widget. We're just going to sort that by name. You could sort that by volume and a couple other ways, but we're just going to keep it at name for now. And we'll go ahead and show our top 10 departments going on here. So all we really did is say, hey, this is how we want to aggregate the data. Now we're going to select the values we want to see. We're going to select our total volume, total number of calls coming in or out of that department. We're going to select how many calls originate at that department. We're going to select how many calls go or terminate at that department. Other things that we may want to see, I love to see total average call duration, but I like some of these other metrics down here, like video calls. In other words, you know what, for sales folks, being on video is great. In different departments, especially if you get into healthcare, things like that, video calls can have a huge impact on your customer base. So I like to see who is doing video calls. Same thing with our technical support groups. Seeing who you're talking to is fantastic. So I like to add that in there. Also, I like to add, how many people are sharing their screens or what departments are sharing their screens. Now, obviously, I expect more of that from a technical support department. But depending on the nature of your organization, you may want different parts of your organization sharing their screens as well. I'm going to add things like, let's see, I know it's in here. I'm going to add the answered count. So we can see how many people are answering calls. I'm going to add the calls to voicemail. In other words, just understanding how many calls are going to voicemail. Great metric to have. So now we're looking at this from a department level. And you can see, you guys add till you're blue in the face. You can add all kinds of things in here that are pertinent to your organization and how your organization manages calls. These are just some of the key ones that we see most people kind of using, and from an executive perspective, what they're looking at to understand department productivity. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our search. Now, again, we're building a department widget. So I can come in here and select departments, or I can do the same thing we did for our other widgets up top and select scenarios. And I'm going to do that total calls again, because this is going to give me everybody, regardless of whether they're in a department or not. And frankly, I want to see that information. As an executive, that's important information. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and save this. And we've got a couple different departments here. We're looking at all of our calls. Oh, you know what? I forgot to set the day. So let's go ahead and adjust the time period so we can get a little bit more data in my lab and show you a little bit more than just one department here. And let's do, we'll do the current, let's do current previous 2 months. That's what we're doing on all of our others. And there we go. This is a great executive high-level dashboard, because what I'm doing is I am now looking at all the departments that are available in my organization, how many calls are coming into those departments, how many calls they're placing, how many calls they're receiving, who's doing video calls, how many people are sharing their screens, how many calls are going to voicemail for the various departments. This is a great high-level comparison where I can look at department to department to see how they are performing. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is we've got 3 technical support departments. All of this information that's being managed is coming directly from your teams. Your Microsoft Teams is probably importing information from your Active Directory, or it's part of your Teams organization being held in Azure. So this just means that, hey, somebody is changing the department names for different users or different entities. We probably need to make sure that whoever manages that kind of HR aspect of getting users into your organization is on the same page and not kind of abbreviating department for different department names. All right. So with this, great information here. We've got a lot of departments, but the same way we kind of did this before, we're going to continue to compound this. So we're not done. This is great for departments, but you know what, Victor? I now want to see that from a team's perspective. Yep, absolutely. We could reinvent the wheel, but we're not going to. We're just simply going to copy this and change it from departments over to teams, and we're going to see the same information from teams. So what we're going to do is we're going to just change the name of our widget, and we're going to go ahead and switch our we're going to switch our grouping, and switch our grouping, and that's it. We're done. Now we're showing our departments. We're also showing our teams. And now I can see from a team's perspective all the various teams that we have programmed in there and how the teams are performing. So Each one of these does not have to be created from scratch. You can really build off of what you've got. I mean, in less than 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe tops, we've built 6, 7, 8 different widgets that you can now present to an executive to show high level how your organization is performing. Now, remember in the very beginning, I toggled this guy on. And again, to get here, to get to that toggle, I'm just going to edit my dashboard, not my widget, edit my dashboard. And I'm going to go to the permalink and I toggle that guy on. Once we save it, we get this cool little link right here. I could send that off to my executive and they could save that as a favorite. This link is not going to change, but that executive now has a live running dashboard of exactly what we created. This is huge because they don't have to log in. They don't have to go ahead and do different things. They can come in here and look at this dashboard whenever they want. And you could build a bunch of different dashboards just by copying the whole thing. This one I've built for the current and previous month, but you know what? I may want to look at this from today's perspective. Well, Victor, I don't want to have to go through and build all these 6 widgets. Yeah, we did it in less than 20 minutes, but that's 20 minutes I don't want to have to burn. So, you know what? I could just copy this whole dashboard and say daily. And now all I have to do is, instead of copying and re-adding these widgets, all I'm going to have to do to that new dashboard is go in and change my time frame. And now I've got the same exact dashboard, but now just looking at daily stats. So now this is my daily one. So instead of doing the daily there, I'm just going to come in, change this, and look at today's date. And if I do that on all these widgets that we created, probably take me less than 2 or 3 minutes. And now I've got both a daily dashboard and a current and previous month dashboard. And you can build these off quarters and different business units and things like that. Now, one last thing I'm going to go ahead and show you here, because I know we are just about out of time, is one of the things that you're going to notice is some of these things are maybe not the most user-friendly naming conventions. You do have the ability to change these. But prior to this webinar here, I went and created what's called a custom label. Custom labels give you the ability to change values. Now you'll notice this one I didn't change it on. This one I did. So this is now calls placed, calls received. We can do calls where ring no answer. So you can change those custom values. That's done in the configuration section here under custom labels. This makes it very, very user friendly. And if you want some additional information on building out some custom labels, we do have a webinar out there on that already. So that is a great resource, and it does make it much more user friendly. So that way, and you can see the permalink also changed right away too. This makes it much more user friendly, much more adaptable for executives, because originating call count, total call count, not connected call count, sometimes those can be a little bit confusing, and it's just not your normal verbiage. It's UC verbiage. So you can go ahead in there and change that. So Juan, with that, I'm going to pass the ball back to you. Do we have any questions today?